working.
We are live. Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Proverbial Masterminds. We're happy to be back with you this Friday, first week of May. So excited for this. I am Dr. Sherry, and this is my friend Erin Harrigan.
How is it the first week of May? Like, what happened?
Well, I can explain how. So, but I won't, because I won't be a jerk about it.
It's in the calendar. So before we went live, I was just saying to Dr. Sherry, normally we connect and we're like, here's what I'm thinking. And what are you thinking? And we just have had a lot going on. So
we have not connected at all.
Not connected. I will say, however, Sherry did an amazing job. She spoke to my Rooted group coaching members today, and the feedback is incredible. So
thank you for having me there.
You are so welcome. We're calling this Simple Minded, which reminds me of Simple Minds, which reminds me of the Breakfast Club.
Oh, yeah.
Which reminds me of
Judd Nelson at the end walking across the right. Yes.
Yes.
Whatever happened to Judd? I don't know.
Yeah. He was like in some funky stuff, and I don't even know. But here we are. It's Friday. We're talking about Proverbs. If you are new to us, or maybe you just need the reminder, we have been in the book of Proverbs, a verse a day since like November, and really just minding the master's wisdom is what we're going to do. And what's been so fascinating to me on this is the repetition, right? So they say in business that someone needs to see something like 7 to 12 or even more times for it to sink in. And what I love is like, that is what King Solomon knew already when he was writing Proverbs, because
probably from personal experience, right? Like that's how many times he had to be hit in the face with stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was on a podcast. I was a podcast guest the other day, and she said, sometimes God whispers, and sometimes God flicks you, and sometimes he hits you with a 2x4.
Wow.
So I feel like, Solomon.
That's really funny.
He's just reminding us that wisdom is so important to carry it with us everywhere. So where are we going? We're in chapter 7.
Yeah, I don't know where we're going with this, but I think the first thing that we need to do is read the verses that we've read for the last 7 days.
Yes.
Which would be chapter 7, verses 6 through 12. Verses 6 through 12. Yeah. 6
through 12. I'm getting there. Go ahead.
You want me to read?
Yeah, because I'm getting there on my Bible app. Easy to carry with you. Go ahead.
For at the window of my house, I looked through my lattice. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But anyway, for at the right. For at the window of my house, I looked through my lattice. It's like a creepy stalker flick, like looking through okay. For at the window of my house, I looked through my lattice and saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths a man devoid of understanding, a young man devoid of understanding, passing along the street near her corner. And he took the path to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. That's worth noting. And there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. There's that word crafty again. She was loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay at home. At times she was outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. All right. So what's your initial takeaway from that?
Well, so the first thing that struck me was, he says, so in the English Standard Version, a young man lacking sense. Yeah. So it's interesting to me because I wondered as he was writing this, is it a young man who's just immature, but was there more going on there? Like, I don't know. What was coming to my mind was there some kind of special needs around that, because this harlot, this temptation just takes advantage of you, whether you have sense or not. But then it also struck me, did he lack sense because he was not being taught as Solomon is teaching his children? But that it was all done under the veil of darkness.
Yeah, I mean, it specifies that there in 4 different ways: in the
Yeah.
twilight, in the evening, in the black, and dark night.
Yes. Yes.
And I thought about, like, is that the place where those things happen, where we're most likely to be deceived, or is that the place that we go to in order to be deceived?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, because sometimes if we wanna do wrong, we know how to hide it,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Or at least we have a compunction to hide it. And but it's also, the nighttime is when more can be done unseen,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
and maybe unjudged. But can we back up to to the first verse 6 of chapter 7? For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice. Like, okay, so here's what I think about this. Like, one, there's always somebody watching,
Ooh. I
right?
feel like somebody watching me. Right?
But okay, so think about this from like a neighbor's perspective. Your neighbors kind of see what you do, they watch what you do, they watch you, and strangers watch you. And so even if there's a crack of availability for somebody to see what you do, I mean, it kind of goes back to the avoid the appearance of evil,
Right.
right? So even if we think we're under cover of night, like, just to be cautious, because somebody can see our example,
Yes. Yes.
right? Somebody can be peering through. I hope nobody's peering through the lattice at you. It's a little weird, but I think it's symbolic of, if there's even a crack of an opening to
Yes.
see something that
Yeah.
yeah, is not beneficial to you or to anybody else, then it's going to be seen.
Yes. In some way.
Mhm.
And also that also brings up for me that God sees it all. Like, it doesn't matter
Mhm.
how well we try to cover it. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter, what we're hiding behind. Um, and of course we know God doesn't even need a little crack because like he can see everything. But yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to what we've talked about before. Where is that about? But here it is. I just flipped right to it.
Of
Thank you,
course.
God. Chapter 4 of Proverbs, verse 18. But the path of the just is like the shining sun that shines ever brighter unto the perfect day.
Mm, mm.
Right. So, like, when we are simple minded, when we are silly, when we are lacking in understanding, when we are lacking in wisdom, we will stumble around in the dark.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So as we're pursuing God's wisdom, I was about to say, as we're pursuing success God's way, because that's your tagline. Um, anyway, then our path, then we walk confidently in the light
Yes.
instead of stumbling around in the dark. The other thing I think is interesting about this is I perceived among the youths.
Among the group of them.
Yeah, and because he looked out and he saw the simple, he saw the youths. Now, I mean, youth, I guess, is used in different ways throughout the Bible, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're like a teenager, but what I take it as is somebody who's immature in their walk with God,
Mhm.
right? Like, it's yes, I've made a commitment, but it's not really playing out in all, areas of my life. I'm a baby, as it were.
Right.
But also the picture here is that they're together. The simple-minded are stumbling around together.
Oh, that's good.
And so I think that for us, even if we are simple-minded, like if we're babies, especially even if we're not babies, but we have moments or days or weeks or months where we feel like a baby, where we feel like we're regressing, where we feel like we're being immature in our faith, it's really important to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with wise counsel, with not just to go to counsel, but just be around wise people instead of staying around people who are like you and who get you. Like, God doesn't want to leave you the same.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So getting out from among the simple-minded, and going to be with people leaning into the wisdom and the just company, not just wisdom, not like going to sit at somebody's feet and let them tell you all of life's mysteries. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying spending time with people who make it a priority to seek God's wisdom
Mm.
instead of stumbling around with people who are like you.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I love that. That's such a good insight right there. So good.
That's why I'm
Now,
glad we have this too.
in my version,
Mhm.
I'm just going to skip ahead because, the Bible just will tell it like it is. Because in my version, it says, behold, the woman meets him dressed as a prostitute. Like, just saying it.
There were no bones about it.
There were no bones about it. No, no. And, here he is like taking the road. He takes the road to her house, which tells me like he knows as he's passing the corner, we know that road exists. We
Mhm.
know the direction,
Mhm.
and God in his grace and mercy allows us free will,
Yeah, yeah.
so we can choose not to walk down that road, but he takes the road
Mhm.
and she's meeting him there.
Mhm.
So it's going back to what you were just saying about like who you're surrounding yourself with, what whose directions are you following?
Mhm. Mhm.
It reminds me of sort of um the view of a crowd, and the crowd is moving one way, and so as not to be trampled, you just keep going with the crowd, even though that may not be the right way.
Yeah, I had a one of my pastors at a former church I used to go to said, I forget how he put it. He said, some of you have made a profession of faith and you believe in Jesus, but some of you are still down there in the dark in the mud crawling around with who you used to be.
Mm.
Because the really cool thing is like the new creation part, like is our spirit being reconciled, right? Like God makes us a new creation, but that doesn't mean our life is like totally like it's night and day from one moment to, that's not what that means. But for us to say, I want to be in the light. Do you know
Mm.
that song? I want to be in the light as you are in the light. I want to shine like the stars in the heavens.
Yes.
Yeah, like so we must have an increasing hunger or thirst to be in the light and less desire to be in the dark or to settle for being in the dark, because that's not the life that God has promised you as a new creation.
Yeah. Yeah. But we all have that choice.
Yeah.
And I think whether you're new to your Christian walk or you've been in your Christian walk for a while, I think some people do really well with the discipline of making the right choice.
Mhm.
And I think that some of us struggle. It
Mhm.
just but that's the beauty of it, right? Because we're never going to be perfect on this side of heaven.
It's funny that you say that because I have always felt like, oh my gosh, other people just seem to have really good discipline and I just really don't. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, am I just a slow learner? Am I a late bloomer? Like what is going on with me? But I think we all have different journeys and different discoveries. Um there's no linear process,
Oh,
right? Because it's a relationship,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's just knowing God. And I want to call attention again to, I mean, really, like he's been talking about Solomon in the book of Proverbs has been talking about adultery for like ever. I feel like we've been on adultery forever. And so, and we're not going to end there because next Friday we're still
We're
moving
not.
ahead.
We're still there.
We're right. We're like kind of not even finishing this story. I mean, this story of what happens when you follow down this path and you stumble around with the other
Got a few more weeks
simple-minded.
of this. Yeah.
Yes. We have a few more weeks of this. So I think just focusing on this, I think the other thing that I see is that it says she was loud and rebellious and her feet would not stay at home.
Mm.
And when I think of somebody who's loud and rebellious, I can't help but think of somebody who is the only people who would want to be around that are people who are immature,
Right.
right? Because we don't,
No.
I don't,
Mm-mm.
you know,
Yeah.
maybe before I wanted to be in loud, crowded bars, like when I was younger.
So it's funny you say
It's
that.
like, no, I don't want to be, no, I just
So
want to stay at home.
right. So on Cinco de Mayo, so 31 years ago in April, my husband and I met in a bar. I was working as a waitress in a cocktail bar, just like the song. And I mean, it would get crazy, right?
Yeah.
So at that point in our lives, we were 23. So like that was different. We were immature. So on Wednesday, it was Cinco de Mayo. I had just come back from my mission trip. So we went to have margaritas, because just because you go on a mission trip doesn't mean you don't have margaritas. I mean, come on. But here's my thing. So now they, people are out and about, and
Yeah.
this restaurant near us, they have a whole outside seating area, but there were a lot of people inside. This is not about masks or whatever. It's about noise.
Okay.
So we're standing there waiting for the table, and we go to the bar and we get our beverages and we step outside, and then I went inside, and it's loud, so loud.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like not culture shock, but it was like a shock to my eardrums,
Yes.
because we haven't been in a place that's loud. So I went back in to check on our table, and they start bringing these drinks to a table. It must have been somebody's birthday. And they're like, "Ah!" And it's this big, loud cheer and singing. And I'm like, yeah, I am so glad I'm not that part of my life anymore.
Right.
I don't want to be around that, because I'm mature in a different way. And if you're watching this and you are the party person,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you're not mature. I'm just saying, for me, that is not where I am in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like, put me back on my own private deck with a margarita.
Well, that's what I said. I'm like, maybe we should just order it to go.
Right. We're just old.
Because we're old.
Because we're old.
We're old, right?
Yeah.
But it's not even being old, because I have a 23-year-old, almost 24-year-old daughter, and she would much prefer a quiet evening at home
Yeah.
than to be out in a rowdy group of people.
Yeah.
So I think it, in this, just like in this case, it's like, he keeps driving home, this adultery piece. But like we've talked about before, it's really, where is our, like, are we cheating on God?
Yeah.
Are we absorbing the wisdom and not just taking it in, but then putting it into action, because we have free will to choose to do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's, to me too, it's the simple-minded are also, they're like we just talked about, undisciplined.
Yes.
And so, like, that's the way she's described, is her feet wouldn't stay at home. Like, she just couldn't contain herself. Right. And so that just goes back to the point of choosing really carefully who you're around.
Yes.
I mean, the world even says who you're around says who you're going to be.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Somebody has a famous quote.
You are the sum of the 5 people you hang around most.
Yes.
Right.
So I think this is an invitation for each of us to consider the people that we hang with, that we stumble around with, or whatever, and say, like, is this what I want my life to look like? And if it is, okay, that's whatever. That's between you and God. But if it's not, you don't have to stay there. You don't have to wander around with them. There are other people who are available to you, and there are other people who will love you. I think a lot of times people stay in that too, because they don't feel like they have any other friends, or
exactly. Yes. It's that belonging and that
Mhm.
connection.
Mhm.
And I think it also is an invitation for us to think about who we are in that group and what are we bringing to the group. Are we reflecting God's light? Are we, being salt and light?
Mm.
Um, are we lifting the group? Somebody once said, like, um, when you come into the room, do you light up the room? Not
Mhm.
not in a limelight kind of way, but do you light up the room or do you suck all the air out of it?
Mm.
Because we have that choice too
Mhm.
with those that we're around, because we influence them as much as they influence us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what are some practical ways for us to not be simple-minded?
Well, for me, I think the number one thing is to be in the word.
Mhm.
Um, because that, the Bible really is our ultimate source of wisdom and
Yeah.
personal development and all of those things. And don't get me wrong, I don't think you don't have to know and understand all the depths of the meaning,
Mhm.
but being in the word and asking the Lord to reveal, like one thing that you just did is you were like, I'm looking for, oh, here it is. Like the Lord knows when you're seeking, the Lord
Mhm.
knows when you're looking for something. And so I think that's one way to be continually growing in our relationship with Him
Mhm.
and continually renewing the mind, as it
Mhm.
says in Romans 12, um, so that we aren't simple minded and naive.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think?
So reading the Bible, I think just so even if you're like let's say you're like me and you live by yourself, I think that not stumbling around with the simple-minded is carries over into I guess what we entertain. So just a couple of examples, like I started watching this show on Netflix the other day and I was like, this is just it's not good. There's nothing edifying about it. It was very simple-minded. It was like, that's not even funny. Like, I know that you meant that to be funny, but that's not funny. But me staying in the company of that would
Mm.
have been me choosing to stumble around in the dark with the
Oh,
unwashed,
yeah, that's a great example. Yeah.
right? So for me, God will speak to me a lot and say, I don't think, this, not even speak to me directly, but it's just because I know what is not, is wise and what is not. I'm like, this is not wise.
Yeah.
Why would I spend my time here?
Yeah.
And so I think spending your time, that goes with, what you're looking at on your phone or, what you're watching, what you're reading.
All of that.
Yeah, if it's not, so that's the company you keep too
Yeah.
is, yeah, the influences or the voices or the words of others that you're taking in.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you can't, love entertainment and be entertained and watch things, but that's not what I mean. But if you get the sense that it's empty
Yes.
and simple-minded and meaningless, then it is.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like that's the Holy Spirit saying,
Yeah.
hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that example. I love that thinking about it that way because I think that sometimes, people think that as Christians, we don't watch these things or we don't. And honestly, it's mostly because we have a moment like you just had, which is
Mhm.
like, why am I even watching this? Like,
Right, it's like I don't wanna be in the loud, noisy bar. I
right,
don't wanna watch this show. There's nothing, that gives me anything good.
right, right. And going back to what you said earlier, when the Lord changes us, when we become a new creation, let me
Yes.
connect this dot that's coming up for me. There are things we just don't want anymore. It's not that change happens over time, as my
Yes, it does.
mentor in my book, who she fondly is known as the Velvet Hammer. In my sanctification, like I'm a check it off girl. So I'm like, okay, I've done these things. What's next? And she's like,
Well,
sanctification is not a checklist, but there are things that we begin to realize that we no
mhm,
longer, maybe we enjoyed before, that we no longer enjoy, that we no longer really want to be around. And it's not please know, and don't take it as, oh, they think they're too good. No, like we literally, as we become this new creation, we lose our taste for those things.
Yeah, I was going to say it doesn't, we may not necessarily lose our taste. I think we do. But I think what happens first is that we try to keep doing the things or thinking the ways or whatever, and it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Like it stops being effective. It stops giving us anything good. Whereas before we experienced something good for us, but now we're like, there's nothing good there. Why am
Yeah.
I doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's all I got for today's Simple Minded.
No, I think that's beautiful. And I think it's been, I don't know about you, but it's been challenging because we've had so much on adultery and you're like, what exactly are we talking about here?
Well,
but I
God
think
knew.
he knew where he wanted us to take it today. So thanks for tuning in.
Yes.
Share with your friends. We're here every Friday at 2 having these conversations. We'd love for you to join in the chat, join in, leave us some DMs or what have you. But we're having a good time really getting to know God's wisdom, and we're learning a lot. So we hope that we're imparting some value to you as well.
Yeah. And so be prepared for next week. We're going to be reading Proverbs chapter 7. Read along with us one verse at a time. We'll be reading Proverbs chapter 7, verses 13 through 19.
Yeah. And hopefully after chapter 7, I don't know, maybe he'll come back to adultery.
We'll find out.